there was a resolve. I was like, okay, this man's gonna kill me someday. I mean, he'd always beat on me.
Yeah.
But he'd never, I mean, other than throwing me across the room that time, he had never done real bodily injury. It was all cosmetic, you know.
Okay. But this was the first time something was actually broken.
Yes.
So, considering that you had just come from that experience at church recently, and then all of this happened, how did you feel about that church experience and just Christianity in general at that point?
Right. I thought, okay, I tried.
Yeah.
I tried Christianity. It doesn't work. I tried Jehovah's Witness. It didn't work. I was very disillusioned as far as that aspect of having a faith-based life.
Right.
I'd never had a faith-based life. I didn't grow up in a home where religion was even part of our household. And when I first even heard of God, it was through a Bible study my mother was doing with a Jehovah's Witnesses.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably between 10 and 11 and 12, somewhere at that age. And that's the first time I heard of God.
Okay.
And that's the first time I heard create like we're created. I just saw my parents as my parents, and I never thought of where did I come from.
Okay.
And so that Bible study, I distinctly remember going outside and laying down on the grass and looking straight up into the sky. And my question was, how can a human know God? The lady told us that he's invisible, yet he's everywhere, and that he can hear us and he knows us. Well, how can we know him? And that was always the question of my heart from the time I was 10, 11, my whole life. That was always in the back of my mind.
Wow. So what was your experience studying with the Jehovah's Witness?
I was very loyal to Mrs. Allen because she took an interest in me, and she really cared about me. But there came a point where she said, to go to heaven, Jehovah's Witnesses believe you have to be part of 144,000. And these people are the kind that are like pure. They're like angelic. They're like the cream of the crop here on earth. And so she's like, you're not going to be part of the 144,000 just because of some circumstances in your life. It's not your fault, but that rules you out. So what you can hope for is to work for a place on Paradise Regained. And so from the time I was 10, 11, 12-ish, studied with Rella Allen and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and until I was about 15-ish, where they said I was unteachable, and they washed their hands of me because I couldn't understand their doctrine. It didn't make sense to me.
Wow. So now you can't go into heaven because of something that happened to me as a child.
Yes.
And now you're unteachable, so they don't want anything to do with you.
Yes. Well, yeah, they literally did this. They washed their hands of me.
So how did that make you feel about yourself?
At the age of 14, 15, 16, went into a deep depression. So deep. I was like, wow, I have no purpose in life. I don't have a God. God doesn't love me. When I die, I'm just what happens.
Yeah.
I'm just, and so I went into a very severe depression, and then that's where my obsession with boys and men, at that point intensified. Because what else do I have?
Yeah. And
so I started looking for love in those relationships. Like, that's all I'm going to have.
Wow. So going back to your marriage, how long did it take for you to finally escape your husband?
Okay, so while I'm in the hospital, I'm determined that we're done. and he's dead to me, and he knew it. And so at first he made all of the typical promises, and so I said, okay, I'll stay and I'll give it a try. Within 2 weeks, he was back to, I could see him sliding, and I was like, okay, it's going to happen again. I could see the painting on the wall. And so one weekend, he used to disappear, so I knew he was doing things, for drugs and stuff, because he was very addicted to drugs. And I was totally against it because he had these low-life friends. And to me, his drug use and his friends all reminded me of the low life. And so I was never interested in the drugs at that time. And so he took off one weekend, and so I packed up my kids, and I looked for some housing as far away that I could get away. And I found an apartment that would let me rent. And one weekend we moved in, and I found a job I left my job where my friend was that led me, to that church. And so I rented this apartment. My kids and I were there. We had nothing. We were literally sleeping on the rugs.
Wow.
And little by little, I started accumulating stuff. But it was a kind of setup where it was a gated apartment, very safe. There was 3 apartments that faced each other, and there was a pool in the middle, and the manager could have the apartment upstairs, and he oversaw everything. He saw everything, so he took care of everything. And it became a little family, a little, it became a close-knit family.
The apartment, the people in the apartment.
Yeah, the residents there. And so I began to make new friends.
Oh, wow.
And some of these friends had prestigious jobs, and yet they were smoking weed, and they were, drinking. And so I was like, oh, I guess maybe drugs aren't that bad.
Okay, so they didn't look like the low lives that your husband was hanging out with. They were more high class, but they were getting high and drinking. Okay.
Yeah, and so we were partying and everything. And so that's what introduced me to the marijuana.
Okay.
And then that's when I started drinking a little bit more, smoking weed and drinking. And so there was, all of the residents were very family oriented. Most of the apartments had children, and I had little children, but there was this one lady off to the side, and she was very standoffish. She would stand at her door and kind of look at us, and sometimes she would come out when we had potlucks.
Okay.
Sometimes she'd come out and eat with us, but then she'd go back in, and she had a black cat, and she had red hair. And
this is the 70s, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is 77.
Okay.
76, 77-ish. And so she calls me over this one time, and she said, I've been watching you over the summer, and she said, I want you to know that I'm a practicing witch. Mm-hmm. And she said, and you have gifts. Now, how she could see that and know that just by watching me, but I was intrigued because I held women in esteem more than men. I always respected women. Always, I respected their voice. I respected their lives, because it was men that I didn't trust.
Right.
And that I didn't really basically like them. I would just use them for what I could use them for.
Okay. She
started teaching me things about the occult.
Okay.
And because my personality is very very detail oriented, I've worked in banks for many years because I love detail work, and I love research. Oh, I love research. And so I started researching on my own. Mm-hmm. I bought a ton of books about numerology, astrology, tarot cards, although I never got into tarot cards personally. But I started gathering all this information about the occult.
Okay.
And so I actually started getting past her. I mean, she could no longer teach me.
So you were getting deeper into it than she was.
Yes, and the buzz in the apartments were that I really knew what I was talking about, because I would do people's tarot, and I would do people's horoscope, and I was combining numerology and astrology together, and that it was more accurate.
Okay.
And so the things that I saw there, which I didn't know where the wisdom was coming from, but the things that I saw were beginning to happen. And so I had this desire of wanting to help people. And so I had many people coming to me, like it just word of mouth was spreading. And I had a lot of people coming to me for me to do their horoscopes. And the more that I got into the occult, the more I got into the drugs. And so I had people sharing acid with me. First time I started doing acid was with some of my clients. And so then I saw that I could see their aura, which I didn't even know what that was. But I remember the first time dropping acid, and then we were sitting around drinking and smoking weed and talking, and all of a sudden I was like, and I was like, wow, you're beautiful. You have all this color around you. And when she heard that I could see auras, then she became my enemy.
Oh, so she was now jealous of you.
Yes.
Ah.
Yes. So tensions were pretty tense there. And there's a dark power behind that. And because my life wasn't established in any religious foundation, and because I thought I had tried Christianity, I thought this was a gift. I really thought it was a gift.
Because that's what she told you. So before she came to you and said, I see that you have a gift, what did you think about yourself and your value and your worth?
I was so beaten down by my ex-husband that I just felt unlovable, unattractive. And that was another motivation to, go after men all the time, or to have their interest in me, because I felt so inadequate as a woman. And there's my uncle in the background. No man's ever going to want you. And so my father abandoned me. I had real heartbreak, a very heavy heartbreak. And I was always very high maintenance with people. If we were friends, I needed so much from you.
Okay, a lot of attention, a lot of time, and things like that.
And so, although my school years, I had very good friends because they knew me from elementary, junior high, and high school.
Yes.
I established histories, but as an adult, I would drain my friends.
I see.
So, I would have friendships for short periods of time because they just couldn't take my intensity.
Right. So, coming into this new life in this apartment, now you're free from your ex-husband. And you believe these things about yourself, and this woman comes and says you have a gift, and now all these people are coming to you. So at that time, what did that do for you?
Yes, I felt very powerful.
Okay.
And I felt I wanted to break all shackles of anything that will hold me back. And so I was trying different drugs. I was getting more and more hooked onto the marijuana. I was drinking more because I was thinking that is what suppressed my natural will and my natural abilities, which is what drugs and alcohol do. They rob you of your own will and your own inhibitions. So I was suppressing that so that I could further my art. And I really was wanting to do that because I wanted to help people. And one of the ladies in the apartment, she just offhandedly said one time, I have such a good husband, and he's so good, except when he drinks. And so she said, can you help me? And I had never been approached that way. I'd just been doing horoscopes and stuff, and then seeing the auras. And so I said, out of nowhere, I don't even know how I knew this, bring me something that he handles every day. And so she brought me a pen, and I did an incantation over it, gave it back to her, and then weeks and months and whatever went by, and she comes back and she says, Glenda, he's not drinking anymore. So that really spurred me. I was like, okay, I am really helping people. So yes, I was on top. For the first time, I was in control of my life. I had gifts and talents. I was helping people. But yet I was getting more and more hooked on the drugs and the occult.
So those were what you felt like were the benefits of going deeper into witchcraft. Yes. What was the other side of that? What types of things were happening?
And it ties in with my baptism. Okay, so I thought there's no such thing as God. There's no such thing as Christianity. And I considered myself an atheist at that point.
Okay.
I told my mother, everybody who knew me, I'm an atheist. And so just because I didn't believe in God, later I discovered that God always committed himself to me. And so I had people and strangers. I had younger children. I had people and strangers coming in and out of my house all the time for occult reasons. At one point, I was dealing drugs, and I had people coming and going, buying weed for me, coming and like they would come in and they want to try it first. So we would get stoned, and then I would sell it to them. I mean, so much evil could have happened to me. So much bad could have happened to me. I could have had my kids taken away from me. I could have been arrested, and I deserved it. I don't know why God spared that, except that my children were little.
Wow.
And that is what spurred me. My children, what was always my saving grace, because everything I did was for them. And so one of my friends, the ladies that I would get loaded with, I would drop acid with her. You know, we did our pills together, speed, quaaludes, whatever. And she said, "Oh, I have this coupon to get a tarot card reading. You wanna go with me?" And so I took her, and her life was a mess. Girl, her life was a mess. And so I went with her, and so I'm sitting back, and she's way over there with the lady, and I can overhear. And so this lady is telling her all kinds of stuff. And I knew Sheila, and I was like, I was like, this lady is total BS with her.
So she's scamming her.
She's scamming her totally.
Okay.
And Sheila's taking it all in. And so, you know, they had their hour, whatever, and so we're getting ready to go. And she looked at me, she said, "Let me do your cards." I said, "No, that's all right," because I mean, I'm like, I know this stuff.
Like this, I do this.
I do this. I don't do tarot, but I do this. And I says, "No." And then she goes, I go, "I'm not going to waste my money on that." And I didn't want to give her any information about me. And she goes, "I'll do it free." And, you know, Sheila had just paid, you know, and I go, "Okay." And I thought to myself, what harm could it do?
Right.
So we sit down, and she lays her cards out, and then she starts turning them over. And I saw her face go white. Because I was looking right at her. I didn't want her to pull any fast one on me. I was totally aware of my surroundings. And I saw her eyes get big, and I saw her go white. And then she's turning the cards, and she's like, "You have this card, you have this card." And she's like, there's going to be an attempt made on your life in 3 days. And she's like turning this card and this card, and she's like, "You have a powerful enemy." And she's looking all of these cards, and she's go, "Wow, you got a powerful friend." And I'm like, you know, and then she's like, "Oh, you know, you need a spiritual cleansing." And then she's telling me all this stuff, and I'm just listening to her, taking it in. I'm not reacting. And then she said, and she says, "Oh," I go, "Well, who's the enemy and who's the friend?" And she said, "Only you will know. When it presents itself, only you will know." And then she said, "But your your friend," I asked her, "Can he protect me?" And she said, "Yeah." She turns some cards over. She goes, "Go to the book. And I go, the book? I had a ton of books on the occult. And I said, what book? What book? And she goes, I don't know. That's all it says is go to the book. And I was like, okay. And so she said I needed a spiritual cleansing. And so I let her sell me like $500 worth of herbs and stuff that I was supposed to dip myself in like 3 times a day for 7 days, or dip 7 times a day for 3 days. I don't know, something like that.
So you believed her?
I believed her somewhat because I knew enough about seeing things that what she saw could possibly happen.
Okay.
And so yes, to an extent, I believed her.
Okay.
But I didn't show any emotion. I was, we just walked away. And so I was living with this guy at the time. And so I went home and I told him what happened. And I got so wasted. The worst I had ever. I mean, I would smoke a lot and do drugs, but I always had a sense of not letting myself be controlled.
Okay.
Which is what the drugs were beginning to do, because one of the times I took acid, outside of myself, I had my children in bed with me and they're young, and I heard a voice say, just kill them, kill your children. And I heard it. It was not in my mind, it was outside of me. And my love for my kids was so strong, I just ignored it and I fell asleep, and then when I woke up, it went away.
Okay.
But I had heard other unctions to act out against my morality.
Okay.
I would have this unction to do evil, to do harm, and I wouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't do it. I mean, the worst I would do is sell drugs and get people loaded and party with people I didn't know. So I did put our lives in quite a bit of danger.
Right. Right. So what happened after you left the psychic, after she told you those things?
So I told Ralph everything. And
that's the guy you were living with. So you have 3 days until these things are spoken.
Yes, this is Friday. So we're looking at Friday night. I'm thinking Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night.
Okay.
So I'm thinking those 3 days. And so, I mean, I was just so totally wasted. And then I started getting scared. And then I started crying. And he's like, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And I go, you won't be able to stop it. Believe me. And then I'm thinking of my ex-husband. I knew he was due to get out of jail from, I kind of forgot to tell you about when he eventually found me. I had escaped from him.
Yeah, and you were in your own apartment for a long time. He found you.
He finally found me. He always did. He finally found me. He broke into my apartment and he was literally choking me to death. My manager heard me way across the apartments. He heard me screaming and crying out for him. He has keys to all the apartments. He let himself in, and when my ex-husband heard him coming in, he ran down the stairs and ran out.
Okay.
And so we called the police, and they caught him in the area, and they brought him, and they wanted me to identify him. And so I'm looking at him in the back seat, and he's saying, I could read what he was saying. He didn't want me to identify him. And I knew he would kill me.
Yeah.
But I was done. And I says, yes, that's him. I'm going to press charges. So now, 20-something months, almost 2 years have gone by. And we're like, I'm thinking he's getting out of jail. It's got to be him.
So you're thinking he's the enemy.
He's the enemy.
That she's talking about in 3 days.
He's the enemy.
Okay.
And so he was the enemy. And so Ralph was like, I'll take care of you. And I go, you won't be able to. And so I was getting so worked up. He goes, okay, I'll take you away. We'll go away for the weekend. And you won't even be here in the 3 days. And so we take off for San Diego. And so what happened was, surprisingly, one of the last things she said to me was, oh, and by the way, if you go somewhere, don't tell anybody. I don't even know, to this day, I don't know why she said that, but she did. And so here we are, 3 o'clock in the morning. We got the car loaded down, and he had one of those Barracudas where when you looked into his back windshield, you could see inside the trunk.
Okay.
And so he could see you could see our luggage. And my kids were asleep in the back seat. Him and I are in the front seat. We stopped to get gas. So this the truck that's going to refill the gas pumps, he pulls in. He gets out and he's walking around. Ralph's taking care of business. And I'm smoking in the car, so I put the window down so that the smoke would go out. And so he comes up close enough to me and he goes, "Oh, I see you're taking a trip." And I said, like, "Oh yeah, we're going to San Diego to my boyfriend's family's place." And so we're just chatting. And then Ralph comes and he's pumping gas. And so out of nowhere, he goes, "Well, God bless you." And I hadn't heard of God. I hadn't even thought of God for all those 2 years that I thought I tried Christianity and it doesn't work.
Right.
And so I was like, "Okay, thank you." And so, and I mean, I'm just so loaded still. I mean, I'm still smoking, I'm still, And so we're driving along, and I know enough about what she saw that it could be real. And so I start visioning my children. I envision me dead. I envision my kids. They're gonna go to him. I mean, we're still married. We're not even divorced or anything. And they're gonna go with him, and he's gonna be beating on my older son. And so I'm sitting there, and in my heart I said, "God, I don't know if you're real or not, but I need help. What is going to happen to my kids? I could possibly die this weekend. What is going to happen to my kids?" And I said, "I got to know that you're real. I need help." And so we're listening to the radio, and one song after another started coming on, and each song was as if it was dedicated specifically for me.
Wow.
Each song was speaking directly to my heart, the lyrics, everything. And so I was like, "Wow, is that you, God?"
Wow.
And here I am, of course, I'm all loaded, but I'm like, I'm used to kind of hearing voices outside of myself.
Right.
So I was like, "God, is that you?" And when I had that thought, the next song that came on is "I Do Love You."
Wow.
And I just started crying. I go, "God, is that you?" And so that's the first time I sensed that God was real.
Wow.
It was just too coincidental. And so we went to San Diego. We were there until Sunday. I had literally stopped the drugs and everything. And that's unusual for me because we were doing it every day.
Okay. So for those few days, you were like,
Yeah,
"We're good."
Saturday, Sunday, I was finally sober.
Okay.
And so we get back home Sunday. Monday, he goes off to work. And so I called my mom, and I told her what happened. I had always told my mom everything that was going in my life. I never kept anything from her. She knew about all the occult. She knew about I was an atheist. She knew every single thing. I talked to her all the time. I mean, now that I was living with him, he put a phone in. I didn't have a phone when I lived by myself,
Right.
but he put a phone in. So I called my mom, and at that time, there had been a crusade, a Christian crusade, similar to the Billy Graham crusades. So her and a couple of my sisters and a couple of my brother-in-laws had gone forward at the crusade.
Okay, so they were Christians at this
They
point.
were Christians at this point, but
Okay.
just weeks and months.
Okay, it was new.
Yeah, all brand new. And so her and my aunt had started praying for me because they knew I was a atheist, and they knew I was into drugs and everything. So
Okay.
they knew my story. So they had started praying for me. And so then I called my mom and one of my brother-in-laws. I said, "Let me talk to Joy," because he had tried to tell me about Christianity one of the last times I was at my mother's house, and I had a glass of wine in my hand, and I got so mad at him because he's trying to share his faith, and I took the glass of wine and I kept telling him, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, but he kept on and kept on. Mm-hmm. I took the glass of wine and I threw it in his face. Wow. And I said I don't want to hear it. I tried it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And so when this happened to me, I called my mom and I said, let me talk to Joey, because they all lived at my mom's house, and she put him on. And so I apologized to him for what I had done, because I hadn't seen him since then.
Okay.
And I just briefly gave him a synopsis of what had happened to me. And I said, so can you come and tell me more about your faith? Mm. And so, I mean, he jumped on it. He's a new believer. And surprisingly, my sister had just had a baby, this newborn baby, and I hadn't even seen her yet. And I had helped raise her other children. So, and my mother, she got back on the phone and she said, yeah, they're going to come. You know, they want me to get the address. They're getting the kids ready. And she said, oh, guess what? When I hold, her name is Donna, when I hold Donna and look at her little face, she looks just like you when you were a baby. And I go, really? And she goes, yeah, she looks, she kept emphasizing, she looks just like you when you were a baby. And I go, oh, that's neat, Mom, you know. And so my brother-in-law, my sister, they came, and he's trying the best he can to share his faith with me. And I'm getting so bored, and I'm like, it's not hitting home at all. And I'm like, okay, well, I just wanted to hear it, And then I go, because I'm thinking, while he's talking, and he's talking about sin, and he's talking about how he found his faith, I'm like, well, I'm a good person, and I don't do anything sinful. I don't lie to people. I don't rip people off. I'm not a murderer. And here I am living this life of drugs and a cult and living with this guy and disrespecting men. And, that was my whole life was like that. Mm-hmm. And so here I'm saying, I'm a good person.
You didn't see it that way.
I didn't.
Right.
I really didn't identify as a bad person.
Right.
I thought my good stuff, I'm a good witch. Mm-hmm. I help people.
Right.
And I was like, I didn't identify as a bad person at all. I'm a good mother. I protect my kids. Here I am bringing all this danger into our house. And so my sister's baby starts crying, and she needs her diaper changed. She needs a bottle. So at this point, my brother and I were talking, and she had her daughter. So at this point, she gives me her baby.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting there with her baby. Her baby's wailing, and she smells. I could tell she needs her diaper change. And my two sons are standing next to me. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So this is 70. This is 79. So my son was born 73. So he's 6. My other son is 4, and my daughter is 3. And so my two sons were standing right there next to me, and I'm holding my niece. And then my mother's words, she looks just like you when you were a baby. So I'm holding her, and I'm stone sober, but there must have been some residual drug effect, because I almost like projected myself into this little baby. I was like, oh, that's how I looked when I was a baby. Okay. And so I heard this voice say, would you sacrifice your son for this stinky, smelly, crying baby? Mm. I heard that exchange, and I was appalled. Mm. I was like, no. I was just so offended and appalled. And I heard this voice say, that's what I did for you. I sacrificed my son for you. And I identified with this dirty, stinking, crying baby. Mm-hmm. And that shook me to my core. Because I was like, where did that come from? And so, my sister took the baby. And I had real long hair at that time. And I had this technique that I used to do. I would wash my hair first and then take my bath, because I didn't want my hair to get dirty from the bath water. Mm-hmm. And so I told my sister, they were getting ready to go. And I told my sister, oh, will you stay with the kids for a few minutes? I want to take a bath real quick before you guys go. And so they said, yeah. And so I went into the bathroom, and I'm letting the water run, and it's not plugged. I'm just letting the water run. I used to let the faucet run, and I would lay down and I would put my head under the faucet and I would shampoo my hair.
Okay.
And so I shimmy up and I'm kind of like slouching, letting the water come through my hair. And all of a sudden I thought, wow, that sounds like the sound of flames. That came into my mind. That sounds like the sound of flames. And then all of a sudden I felt something holding me down. I felt like I was pinned down.
Be sure to click the link below to watch part 3.